WEFUNK. We funk.
Big LW's KO Cast, Lomachenko-Lopez Recap Reaction Special. I'm your host, Liam Whalen, your boy Big LW.
Big L! WEFUNK. We funk.
Thank you so much for joining us in between episodes here as we speak the sweet science on the SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and more. Of course, YouTube. Hit us up. All of the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, those pretty much just those two. But make sure you hit us up on those two. Instagram to come. Whatever new things get invented, I'm going to be all over those as well. But for now, no shortage of Big LW podcasts, places to find us, and shows we got going. And sometimes the action is so intense that I must come at you in between episodes with the reaction recap special, and thus is the case for the Vasily Lomachenko-Teofimo Lopez mega fight that went down last night. And I guess I'll save my criticisms for the end. However, as it was not a perfect night, not a night without some grievances. Some, of course, the Julie Letterman scorecard that we'll get into is, of course, always some shenanigans, scorecard shenanigans in boxing. What else is new? As well as my thoughts on ESPN. Totally false advertising the fight the entire night. However, we will first, of course, give you my overall feelings to the Loma-Lopez mega fight, a mega fight with a mega result as well, which is not always how it happens, especially just even in recent years in boxing. Speaking of scorecard shenanigans, of course, that being the real headline of the epic Triple G Canelo, at least first fight, and then even just in February pre-Coronaville for the last big, mega fight, of course, the Fury Wilder rematch, which, was a super fun night, great entertaining event and spectacle with boxing, being a front and center in the sports world. However, the in-ring action was a little bit lopsided, and the ultimate, result in early, TKO domination from Fury wasn't as much fun as what we saw last night with the Lomachenko-Lopez action. Just first of all, being such a great competitive fight late into things with the last rounds, really determining, at least as you thought, but really determining the ultimate decision, and just boxing drama and suspense at its best as you're heading into the 12th. So just from that standpoint, just an amazing finish to a mega fight, but as well, like I said, the actual result, the epic upset win for Teofimo Lopez over the great high-tech Vasily Lomachenko. And I guess really more surprising than the actual W is really how he did it, because I told you on the preview episode, I told you that Lopez was a live dog. Everybody has a lot of respect for Lopez, and recognize recognizes him as a very game contender in this fight. However, you didn't necessarily expect him to win by decision, and you definitely didn't expect him to really just outbox Lomo, especially early, and really just dominate him totally, especially early, just totally dominated him. But really just at no point throughout that fight was Lopez ever outclassed by Lomachenko. Okay, even when Lomachenko was in control and at his best, he never really dominated the fight. Lopez would always, answer right back, and he definitely never dominated the fight quite like Lopez dominated the fight early. Anyway, I guess, speaking of the official judges, we'll get into that, like I said, later. However, I did have the fight even early scored a little bit closer than, I guess, even like the ESPN guys, who of course do such a great job, but and they definitely had a vastly different outcomes on there, or at least Andre Ward's scorecard than the judges did, and I had it a little bit even closer than Andre Ward and Timothy Bradley, who's definitely feeling Lopez was in control. But through those first 6 rounds, I actually had it 4-2 through the first 6th, and then by the 9th, after 8 rounds, I had the fight pretty much even through 8. So I had a little bit more respect for what Loma was doing early than those guys did anyway, and especially the judges. And I guess we'll get into that in a minute here for what Loma was doing earlier. But then definitely, however, with Lopez coming out and winning the 12th, all in all, you definitely feel that Lopez deserved the win between what he did early and then what he did late. And I guess I will get into Lopez in a minute, but I think really the fight, for the most part, what it really all boiled down to in a lot of ways was the fact that Lomo just gave away way too many rounds early, as it really, and of course Lomo, as they talked about last night, but he's a notoriously slow starter, and he's coming off the longest layoff in his career. He's a little bit of an older fighter at this point, but just ultimately speaking, he didn't get it going until like the 6th or 7th round, by the time he even really started throwing any punches consistently and getting out of like the feeling out process. It was the 7th round already. And I guess, for Lomo's side, even in those early rounds, though, he was in a lot of ways controlling the action without even punching, as anytime he would feint or juke or make any movements, Lopez would be so overreactive, and it was like, he literally had Lopez counter-punching, and he wasn't even throwing any punches. Through the first 3 rounds, Lomo had thrown like 20 total punches or something that was just insane. However, he really, in a lot of ways seemed to be controlling the pace of the fight and controlling the action in a lot of ways. And I feel that Lomo kind of expected to be able to continue to do that through those middle rounds. However, after a couple of rounds of Lomo not throwing any punches, Lopez got acclimated. He's a really quality game fighter as well, like we talked about. He got acclimated and really just got aggressive and really made the most out of Lomo not throwing anything in those early rounds, and really took over and dominated that for a large stretch there into those early middle rounds. And then really by the time Lomo started fighting, it was more of like desperation and pressure, because he was down 6-0 on all the scorecards. But even in that situation, though, it was kind of like, in some ways, it kind of felt like Lopez was dominating the fight because Loma was letting him dominate the fight, and it almost kind of felt like a horse race, like the Kentucky Derby, where one horse jumps out to this huge lead, and that horse is never gonna really hold on and finish the fight. But it was kind of that's almost the kind of the feeling that you had, where it was just Lomo let him get out to this big lead before he started throwing any punches, and then when Lomo did make his move, like around the 7th or 8th, he really did look very impressive. Lots of straight lefts, lots of real good power punches, just a jab hitting him all over the place. Really did win lots of rounds throughout that middle stretch. And then at the end of the fight, the numbers look a lot better for Lomo than they definitely did throughout the first 6 rounds when he wasn't throwing any punches. And really, if you look at the CompuBox numbers, by the percentages, Lomo really ended up dominating the fight. As and just even in the totals but the total landed punches throughout the end of the fight was 141 to 183. Lopez threw over 300 more punches than Lomo. He only landed an extra 40. Okay, so when Lomo's only thrown 20 punches throughout the six, throughout the first 3 rounds, and hasn't thrown any punches throughout the first 6, by the end of the fight, it's 140, 183 in total landed punches. He out-jabbed him, okay? Lopez actually a 12% jab percentage, 63 to 35, landed jabs. So, when he did ultimately start throwing that jab throughout those middle rounds, really couldn't miss, and was really just all over him with the jab, and as well as the power punches, as Lomo actually out-power percentaged Lopez, which is, Lopez's big thing, is, the all-time highest, power percentage landed punches, the all-time highest, percentage of power punches landed in the lightweight division. Last night, Lomo had a higher percentage. So, and again, when we talk about the judges later, as we talk about on the show a lot, there needs to be more transparency on the judges' scorecards as to what they value and what they're actually looking for. It's this big secret, and it's a cool part of the sport in some regards, that there's a lot of discretion amongst the individual judges. But we need to know before the fight what you're going to be looking for, as opposed to after, because this is a clear example of one guy throwing a lot more punches, the other guy being a lot more efficient, and then one of the judges has a 10-2, which is insane, and we'll get to in a little bit. But like I said, in my book, it was a lot closer of a fight. Throughout the entire fight, really, Lomo was doing a lot better of a job than even the ESPN guys, who of course know a lot more than the stupid judges, even that they were giving him respect for. And then when you look at the numbers, and by the end of the fight, throughout Lomo really controlling those middle rounds, just as Lopez controlled those early rounds, it was definitely a lot closer of an outcome than pretty much than most of us expected at that point. If before the fight you said it was going 12, you would not expect it to be really up in the air for all conventional thought going into that 12th, and really, like I said, at the end of the day, what we will really all remember was that 12th for Lopez. And really, Lopez, not to take anything away from him, he really did go out and win that fight and earn the victory. And really, in a lot of ways, it really was a lot more about what Lopez did right than what Lomo did wrong. Definitely maybe equal parts, both, because, for the bad, tactical decisions by Lomo, not turning it on to the 6th or 7th, Lopez did have a lot to do with that. And a couple of things, like I said, one was, I don't think that Lomo respected his ability to get comfortable without him throwing punches. He's young, he's in his first big fight, he's got the great Lomachenko not throwing any punches, dancing around the ring, and he was able to stay disciplined, stay tight, got aggressive when he needed to, and really made Lomo pay for that decision in those early rounds, especially with a couple of real big body punches early in the fight. And the guys definitely, Timothy Bradley called for it, and then Lopez did it, and, they definitely paid reference to those body shots. However, I don't think that they really necessarily gave credit for how much that might have done to Lomo's legs early in the fight, because for a Lomachenko fight, he just did not seem as graceful dancing around the ring and just so quick in and out of range as he normally does. And a lot of that might be ring rust, like we said, with the long layoff, the older legs or whatnot. But I think a lot of that did have to do with the fact that that Lopez landed a couple of killer body punches early in the fight that maybe just took a little bit, a little bit of the quickness out of his legs, and just leave him a little bit, a little bit longer to kind of get in to the rhythm of the fight. fight, and to get to find his kind of range inside, like he found success, and just kind of delayed things by landing some of those early punches and kind of just slowed down Lomachenko for a couple of rounds. And ultimately, when Lomo did come on, he survived Lomo's best in those mid to late rounds. Stayed on his feet with some major Lomo power punches, and when Lomo was just like an absolute sniper can't miss with some of these combos, Lopez would come back and stayed on his feet and would come back and stayed in the fight throughout those middle rounds, where I felt Lomo he smells blood. He's like a piranha when he smells blood, and is just landing punches a million miles an hour in those 8th and 9th rounds. And I really felt that he had Lopez on the ropes, and I was kind of surprised that Lopez even made it through a couple of those rounds, not through the accumulation of shots that he took, but just the momentum and the landslide of Lomo when he's landing these shots from all angles and in that rhythm and just hitting you with so many shots. You've never seen a fighter survive that until last night, and Lopez really did stand up to the best that Lomo had through those middle rounds, and survived it. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it is really all about the 12th round is what we will all always remember about this fight and about Lopez, barring, we all know what happens with boxers' careers, especially guys from New York City, have a habit of going off the rails. However, he's now in Fayetteville, Arkansas, or whatever the fuck, so hopefully he survives the post-election race wars in red state America. But, definitely a career-defining moment for Teofimo Lopez in that 12th round with all of the marbles on the line, and an all-time great, a desperate, and like I said, smelling blood with all the momentum. He just really out-toughed him. He never got sloppy, but got very, very aggressive, and was just the stronger, more aggressive fighter in that 12th round. After getting beat up for, the couple of rounds before it, he really just, in that 12th, turned it on and just was, like I said, just really manned up in a lot of ways. He was the 23-year-old kid, younger fighter in his first real big career moment against, like we said, a guy that had, 300 amateur fights with one loss, 2 Olympic gold medals. He's just, a professional boxer. He's in his 30-year-old man that's been a professional boxer for his entire life against a 23-year-old kid with his first real taste of this action. And in that 12th round, it was like his bar mitzvah in some ways, because he's a man now after that 12th round, after stepping up in gut check time and gritting out a win. Like I said, he is a man now, and in fact, he is the man now. Because 23-year-old undefeated unified champ of sorts, as I'll get into, but definitely as well, an ESPN promotional favorite before the fight. I mean, afterwards, he's going to be fast-tracked to major stardom with ESPN, which, as we know, really does makes a huge difference for a fighter's career, and he's really just on his way to legendary status. Like I said, a lot can happen, but as a 23-year-old kid beating Lomachenko in a major upset to unify the belts and all is really putting yourself in the boxing, the crosshairs of the boxing spotlight for a long, long time at a highly profile, at a very high profile division lightweight, of course, but you'd expect him to go up from here in weight, just being so young, being so strong and powerful. You definitely, would imagine he'd be able to carry on junior welterweight, or eventually even get up to welterweight, but I guess all that's for the future. But like I said, definitely in the ring and out of the ring, Teofimo Lopez is going to be a star in the sport for years to come, and well-deserved after, you can't take it away that he got the decision, he earned the decision, he deserved the decision. A lot of times in boxing, they do take that away from you. Last night, they did not. And I guess I'll get into it in a minute or so here now with the judges. But, the right guy won the fight. and I guess we will look into what happens next here for Teofimo Lopez and Vasily Lomachenko in the lightweight division. But I guess that's where I gotta get into some of my gripes. And like I just mentioned, with the judges' scorecard, and again, you don't want to make that the focus of the fight because the right guy won the fight, so you cannot and deserve to win the fight. So the fact that really just, like I said, I had the fight much closer than any of the judges. I was more on with Andre Ward, who I think ultimately had it a draw, but the judges that had it at pretty much 4 rounds to 8, 116, 112. All right, that's not crazy. That's probably a little bit harsh for Lomo in my book to give it, to not give Lomo any early rounds, and throughout those middle rounds, throughout the we'll call it the 7th through 11th, those 5 rounds Lomo definitely took, at least 3 or 4 out of those rounds. So to not give Lomo anything else throughout those first 6 is a little bit harsh, but about you can definitely understand that. And like I said, the Lopez rounds were the Lomo rounds were a lot closer than the Lopez rounds early, were a lot of no-brainers for Lopez. There was not very many no-brainers for Lomo. So, 116, 112, not necessarily, I don't love it, but not crazy. Anything worse than that, however, is really just insane, which is where I guess we have to get to Julie Letterman here. And again, we don't want to make the scorecard the headliner, but it does take a little bit of the air out of the evening when you find out that the 12th round really wasn't even determined anything, because the fight was pretty much all sealed up by that point anyway, as the only person that thought that was Teofimo Sr., as he kind of told that to Lopez Jr. going into the 12th round, and Lopez Jr. came out and still fought hard to win that round, and he won the big LW scorecard on that round. But Julie Letterman had the fight 119, 109, 10 rounds to 2. I mean, and we did see Adelaide Bird judge a couple fights on the undercard, which is absolutely insane that Adelaide Bird has anything to do with the sport, as we all know. And now Julie Letterman, we can throw her in the same mix, as hopefully never has anything to do with a significant fight in the rest of her career. And it's kind of sad, but we all, of course, love Julie Letterman, because her dad was a hilarious alcoholic-sounding maniac that would come in on the HBO broadcast. Of course, Harold Letterman, who, of course, Harold Letterman's whole gimmick, by the way, he would just do the scorecards for HBO. And his whole thing was that he was always terrible, and his scorecards were always terrible. All right, Jim, I got the fight 8 rounds to 1. Not a chance for Chavez. And then you find out that it would be like a draw. Like whatever Letterman, I got the fight 50-50 fight going into the 10th, 5 rounds to 5. And then you find out that there would be, a straight sweep on the scorecards, 119, 109, Julie Letterman style. So, I mean, her whole legacy and key to the game was that her dad never knew what the fuck he was talking about, and now she apparently as well, you can only assume, has no idea what the fuck she's talking about, and you can only hope that she never sees any type of significant boxing action again, as I talked about a little bit earlier. But there needs to be more transparency amongst what the judges are looking for as well. There needs to be more ramifications and repercussions to a judge for a ridiculous score in as high profile of a situation as the sport has had, especially just being on mainstream ESPN, trying trying so hard to promote the sport to as many eyes as they can see, and then to have a judge totally discredit the whole evening by a joke of a card does put a damper on it. And like I said, you don't want to focus on it too much because Lopez deserved to win the fight, so it's kind of moot. But at the same point, it's kind of not, because Adelaide Bird did judge earlier fights on the card, and Julie Letterman will judge fights again. And we did see it with the Canelo Alvarez Triple G decision, and we have seen judges totally ruin great nights of boxing boxing and really ruin the sport in general by discrediting it and, doing so much detriment to just the honor and the validity of the sport. It turns it into professional wrestling when one of the judges gives a joke of a scorecard. So it really does put a damper on things, and really does matter a great deal, even though it doesn't really matter at all because Lopez won, so we won't focus on it. However, an absolute joke, and we hope Julie Letterman can just do the unofficial bad joke of scorecards, a la her father, R.I.P. to the great Harold Letterman, right? And I guess more kind of from the Harold Letterman broadcast school, but I guess other complaints. You really got to give some major credit at first to ESPN for, like I just said, putting this fight on regular mainstream ESPN to try to get as many eyes watching the great Vasily Lomachenko against a real live underdog in what was a great fight within the sport of boxing, and really trying to put it on the mainstream. So great job by ESPN for not putting it on the pay-per-view service or the ESPN Plus service. All right, so a little bit of I'll give you some credit there. Right. However, not a good night for ESPN in the sport of boxing in this high-profile situation. And as I talk about all the time, the ESPN analysts crew are my favorite analysts in all of sports. No joke, but I think that Timothy Bradley specifically, Andre Ward as well, but both of those guys for like a 1-2 analyst, especially like an ex-player, athlete, analyst team, okay, Andre Ward and Timothy Bradley are the best in the business of any sports, guys. Or any guys from, Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith to A-Rod, or any sport, any team. In my book, those guys are the best. And you throw Max Kellerman as a studio analyst as well. ESPN boxing coverage, their talent, on-air talent is the best in the business. And compared to the idiots that come on for Showtime especially, but Fox and Zone and the other guys, ESPN's the best. Their guys are the best. Okay, however, last night a really terrible job by ESPN, and we've seen it before for ESPN's like marketing philosophy throughout the entire history of boxing. Before a couple years ago, when ESPN got in the boxing game and they tried their best to blackball boxing to mainstream sports fans, and all of those years when Canelo Alvarez and Triple G were fighting the real fight of the century on HBO, and ESPN doesn't even mention it because they don't have any part in the pie, totally at the detriment of boxing and sports, but for their own selfish interests. We quickly had to forget about that as boxing fans when ESPN got in the game and put on the best fights, and everything they've done over the last couple of years, giving us the best analyst team, and everything that they've done since they're the king of sports marketing at ESPN. All right, we've had to forget the fact that they totally shunned the sport and put us in no man's land forever. Okay, but from the same kind of mind frame of their if it's not on ESPN, if it's not on the ABC Disney family, it doesn't exist. ESPN kind of made a little bit of a joke of themselves in my book last night by making such a big deal promoting this fight as, first of all, a unification fight, but then also a lot of pound for pound talk for Lomo being the pound for pound king. If you're going to talk about the pound for pound, if you're going to really truly try to sell people about a great pound for pound list, how can you not mention Errol Spence or Canelo Alvarez's name never even come up in the pound for pound list? You spend it's been a 6-hour broadcast talking about the pound for pound list, and you never mention Canelo Alvarez or Errol Spence. I mean, you're making a fool of yourself. And even not mentioning Triple G, Berlanga is on this crazy first round knockout streak at super middleweight. And I know it's a first round knockout streak, but Golovkin's. Can you mention the fact that Golovkin, went 10 years with knockouts, or 8 years or whatever with knockouts in the middleweight division? Can that come up through your 6 hours of boxing coverage? Okay, and then as well, this whole unification thing that they're making such a big deal out of, the fact that they didn't even mention Devin Haney or Tank Davis Devin Haney is the WCB World Champion. And if you don't think so, watch the title defense in a couple weeks against Gamboa, because he's fighting for the belt, because he has it. Lomo was given the franchise title when Devin Haney was injured and couldn't, make his fight. He was reinstated the champ and is defending the belt. And we see that a lot, sometimes in boxing we do see that these, there's too many organizations as we know anyway, because with Ring Magazine, there's 6 belts that go out for, ESPN's making a big deal that he's got 4 belts. Well, then one of them is the Ring Magazine, okay? And then the other one is actually owned by Devin Haney, and the WBA belt, a share of that is actually owned by Tank Davis, who's putting it up on the line against Santa Cruz in a couple weeks. In a cross-division fight, the fight that's at 130, but for a 135, but for Davis's 135 belt, So to not even mention the fact, yes, he did, Lomo did carry the WBC franchise belt in, so yes, that was on the line. So yes, in some regards, that Lopez is a WBC franchise champion, I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. But however, can you at least mention the fact that there's a guy that just because he fights for another network, he's fighting for the WBC championship belt against Gamboa in a couple weeks? Can the only person that mentioned Devin Haney on the entire broadcast was Teofimo Lopez in the post-fight interview? Was the only person that mentioned an undefeated champion at the division. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And Tank Davis has been one of the biggest prospects, a way bigger prospect for way longer than Teofimo Lopez fighting under Money Mayweather. Tank Davis has been like the real guy that everybody was expecting to see the big mega fight between Lomo and Tank Davis. That's the real lightweight mega fight that everybody wanted to see. Although we all know it would never happen because Tank Davis is so closely tied to the Showtime and Money Mayweather, and that is they're barely able to get a deal with ESPN and Fox. We're not going to be, you would not expect a Money Mayweather Showtime ESPN deal. That one seems like more of a logistical headache than Spence Crawford, who never got mentioned in the Dream fight last night. So just really, really disingenuine to not mention any of these other great fighters in the sport that are just because they don't fight for ESPN. And as well, just like I said, they as well made a big deal about how this was the biggest fight in boxing. I mean, this is not the biggest fight in boxing last night. Yes, it was a mega fight, and it was, we all wanted to see. But when I did in January of this year, when I did my episode of top 5 fights that I wanted to see this year, Lomo, like I said, versus Tank Davis would have been higher than this one. And Lomo versus anybody, that's still like you still want to see Crawford versus Spence, or Crawford versus any of those great welterweights. Crawford, Showtime, Sean Porter is a way better fight than Loma-Lopez. Okay, Fury Wilder 3 at this point is a more anticipated fight, as well as Fury Joshua, as well as would be a third Canelo Golovkin fight. Okay, and as well, Canelo versus Charlo or Benavidez or any of the other, undefeated middleweights you can throw in the hat, to not even mention any of these other fights throughout the entire night. It just really, you come across, to the boxing fan, you come across as disingenuous and phony. You hear about this a lot with ESPN's connection with UFC. Like we know on this show, I'm not really a huge mixed martial arts fan. So I'm, but I hear that ESPN does the same thing with UFC, never mentioning fighters from Pride or the other, kickboxing world organizations or anything like that. If you're not in UFC, if you're not on ESPN, you don't exist. And when you're talking to, boxing for the most part is not a mainstream sport, even though it was on mainstream ESPN last night. And maybe it's a little bit of a difference if you put it on ESPN compared to ESPN Plus or ESPN pay-per-view. Would they have treated it a little bit differently if it was on ESPN Plus? No, they still wouldn't have mentioned Errol Spence or Canelo Alvarez, because they never do. And especially Devin Haney, the fact to never put up a graphic that Devin Haney is a WBC champion, he's going to be defending the belt, while you're crowing on about how Lopez just unified everything. It's an absolute joke. and most of the fans that you were, putting the show on for last night, perhaps, are going to have no idea that that's the case. But a lot of regular, a lot of boxing fans that are watching, you're just making yourself look like you're being a little phony, especially when the whole, slugline is about how all the fighters want to, you want to see the fighters fight the best, and you love the champions that, they're not afraid to take on any comers and bring on all the names. And then you, as, a sports entertainment network, aren't mentioning any of the other fighters from the other companies yourselves. It's just, you know what I mean? Lopez isn't afraid to fight Devin Haney. Or do you have to be that afraid to mention his name on the broadcast? You can't throw the, I know Tank Davis is fighting on Showtime in a couple weeks, but can you mention the fact that a WBA lightweight championship is up for grabs against Leo Santa Cruz? Can we mention that, please? So... But I guess I digress, and I guess another omission actually about that. But another thing never mentioned on the broadcast. Is there any talk of a rematch clause here? Because Lomachenko is one of the greatest fighters of all time. He just brought three. He was the main marquee draw and just brought 3 belts in. I mean, can we go back to the? Can we have a little bit of a hypothesis as to where he might go next before going back to the drawing board? And I know that, he might go down in weight. He's flirted with going. He expected to win the fight last night, and, he would have wanted to fight, Haney, try to fight Haney and unify further as he talked about. And we might have tried to fight, Davis or Haney and unify 135. He might go down, as he's talked about. A lot of big fighters, especially if he could go down to featherweight again, But a lot of big names there, but a lot of big names at junior lightweight as well. A lot of big names at, super featherweight as well. And again, Lopez, who knows what his, how long he plans to stay with lightweight. But, you would definitely imagine after a fight that had such, hype of a build-up, the fight that lived up to such expectations in the ring, okay, you would imagine a fight that would be so easy to get done with both guys being ESPN, fighters. But, that would definitely make a lot of sense to me, and I guess still help answer some of the questions as to what happens to Lomo's legacy from here, and Lopez's, because, Lopez is a whole great career to still unfold in front of us. But Lomo... definitely has a chance to avenge his loss from Lopez, who might go on to still be, if Lopez is, 24 or 25 and he's just coming out of an epic trilogy versus the great Lomachenko, where he, at the very least took one, that still could be an amazing kickoff to a great career by the time he does eventually, like I say, move up to welterweight. If, in this era, as I've talked about on the show a lot, but you're really hoping to see guys get off of the Money Mayweather, protect your undefeated record at all costs kind of mentality, and not be afraid to go a little old school and take a couple of Julio Cesar Chavez style, pile up a couple of losses on the resume, like Lomo's already now sitting with 2. Technically, it doesn't make him any less great. And if he goes on to avenge this loss, and Lopez goes on to be as great as we all expect, is it that much of a black eye to lose to a close decision, which it should be a close decision, not the Julie Letterman card, but the real card, to lose one to Lopez if you go back and avenge it, and epic trilogy. But after last night, you'd hope that this is a 3-fight epic trilogy written all over it. Okay, you'd love to see the action. You'd think that if Lomo fought, especially in a more quick order, 4 or 5 months, 6 months down the line, shake off a little bit of that ring rust. Nobody was expecting a little bit more. You'd figure that the way that the last 6 rounds of that fight, if the next 12 rounds were fought like the last 6 were, Lomachenko would definitely, you'd expect to win a rematch, setting up for an epic third fight. but there are of course other great fighters at lightweight. Like I said, an undefeated Devin Haney, undefeated Tank Davis. So there are other names. However, you don't expect Lopez and Davis. That fight is not even talked about because that it's not happening with ESPN and Showtime. So you would I would love to think about settling in to the next year of both of their career being consumed with each other. Maybe a couple of tune-up fights in between, especially a second and third fight. But like I said, you'd based on what you saw last night, I'd love to see 24 more rounds of it, at least another 12. And Lomachenko definitely deserves a chance to win his belts back and avenge the defeat. So, finish writing the legacy for the great Vasily Lomachenko, but for the great Teofimo Lopez. The legacy has just begun, along with the takeover. The takeover is undoubtedly here, and his legacy has its first real highlight after the mega upset versus Lomachenko in the mega fight. Big shout out to Brooklyn, y'all, in Fayetteville, Arkansas, or wherever as well, but mostly Brooklyn, of course. And I guess with that, definitely don't forget to be on the lookout for the next episode of Big LW's KO Cast, where, of course, we'll break down the Devin Haney and Tank Davis upcoming title fights for the lightweight championship. So definitely be on the lookout for that right here on Big LW's KO Cast, as well as everything else right here on the Big LW Podcasts family of goodness. And I guess with that, it's no mas for me. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you next time on Big LW's KO Cast.
WEFUNK. We funk.